God's plan, when somebody gets saved, is that they get knitted into his body, into a healthy local church. And so you'll bump into Christians everywhere, but God's plan, if you open the book of Acts, if you go through the epistles, is that local church is healthy. It's got moms and dads in it. It's got young people that are getting saved, and it's a place where you grow and where you thrive. And so our delight at having you here this evening is that we get to partner with you to, alongside Jesus, see his church come to health. Because it is possible that we get all up to all sorts of religious games. And church can look quite ugly, actually. But the one Jesus is building is authentic, where he's the head, where he's glorified. And he's given us his Bible to look at how to do church. And so as you listen to these guys leading sites and leading ministries, I trust there's a great joy and a longing in your heart to see them succeed and to see the church built up into the head, which is Jesus, right? I wonder if the band could come forward. We're going to end in a moment. But I said that what I would do is I would go back to the big idea on God's heart behind Jubilee. So remember, it opened by saying, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. So if we're going to be walking out and ambassadors of Jesus and holding out the Jubilee maker, the Jubilee encounter of God, we've got to surely pray. We look at what's the practical application of this. We've got to spend time with God. We've got to pray. Secondly, Jesus said, the Spirit of the Sovereign is upon me to preach good news. So in other words, practically speaking, what we're longing for this year is that the church, in all its expressions, holds out the gospel like it never has before. And then thirdly, it's not only preach the good news, but particularly to the poor. And for us, that would be the young, the old, and those who've got nothing. To pray, to preach the gospel, particularly to the young, to the old, and those who've got nothing. And so what we want to do is that in this Jubilee year, put those three ideas constantly on the table. Now, obviously, nothing changes in terms of our Sunday meetings and stuff that God's called us to do, the big events that we're going to have. But we don't want to neglect God's prophetic call to his church to pray, to preach the gospel, and particularly to the poor. And so what we thought we would do this year is give you a bangle. Now, I said to my wife, what have they written on this bangle? So she interpreted for me. It says, faith for 50. So here's a clue for everybody over the age of 50. If you just stretch the bangle, the writing becomes bigger. Then you can read it. I did that a minute ago. It's perfect. Faith for 50. And so this is what we're challenging all the sites, to trust God for 50. Faith for 50. So what does that practically mean? This is, you're going to have to, those of you who are deprived of oxygen or cool air, just hang in for another 3 minutes. All 30-something sites are going to take a 2-week period in this year. Some of you bright spark mathematicians are saying 32 times 2 equals 64. That's more than the number of weeks in the year. I know. Don't worry. We can maybe go into next year or double up. But each site 2 weeks. And in those 2 weeks, we're saying to you as a site, put this Jubilee mandate front and center. Pray. And we're challenging you for those 2 weeks, everybody in your site, to pray for 50 minutes a day. There'll be thousands of hours of prayer, tens of thousands of hours of prayer through the end of the year. Can you imagine that? Each site doing that. So some sites will organize prayer chains. Other sites will organize early morning prayer meetings. Other sites will organize evening prayer. Some sites might even fast for the whole 2 weeks. We don't know. But we're saying for that 2-week period, faith to pray like you've never prayed before. Why? Because that's God's call to us. Secondly, faith for everybody in the site to give 50 minutes to ministering to the poor. And so your elders are going to be looking at different avenues that you can get yourself involved in, but you don't have to exclusively do it that way. We're encouraging you to do it primarily through your connect groups. Why? Just so that it's shared, that we do it together. So as a connect group, you say we're going to go and work with that thing that the foundation's doing, or that thing that the foundation's doing. Or like we're in Cape Town, the foundation hasn't really started anything here yet. And Durbanville's the site that I'm in. So the first site that's going to kick this off is Durbanville. For those watching, they're having a heart attack right now. We're going into the area that this wild Aussie was in with those gangs. In addition to that, we've got opportunities with schools in the squatter camps. And so we're going to go in with our connect groups, and 50 minutes, not 50 minutes a day, 50 minutes in the 2 weeks, challenging everybody in the site to say, let's go for it. And then thirdly, we're saying, let's trust God for 50 people to be saved, or at least to hear the gospel. Now, this is what we're going to do. We're going to send the media team to you during those 2 weeks to take a couple of pictures and to get a couple of testimonies. And every 2 weeks on Church News, it will not be more than a minute, but it'll just be, remember how they went through the prayer now? They can do it in 30 seconds. You see what they can do. And they'll be saying, this is where they prayed. These are some of the things that we got up to. And we just think the way to keep it on the agenda so we don't forget about this in April is that like we kick this Jubilee ball down the road for the entire year. And so Faith for 50 is on your bangle, and that'll remind you. Is that clear? Well, if it's not, it will become clear, I promise you, after the 5th announcement.